Hey, what's going on, guys? So this is just meant to be a conversation piece, man. This is interesting. Let's take it back for home theater. I'm just going to have a conversation with you guys. Appreciate you guys supporting the channel. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give me some love. I'll definitely give it back. But this is interesting, and I've been thinking a lot more about this. So this is like my worst fear when it comes to me thinking about upgrading my home theater and especially when it comes to audio specifically. So when it comes to audio, we know that the speakers are the biggest component ultimately. They're the most important part of your audio experience. They generate the sound that you hear, so they have to be legit. And it's a rabbit hole, man. Speakers go from you get speakers for less than $100, and there are speakers out there that cost $1 million, right? I mean, there's this craziness, and figuring out, what is the best speaker for you, and what's the point that where do you want to fit into the spectrum? Where's your stopping point? Where's your end game, as I like to call it? And that's tricky, man, and it takes years. But here's the thing: when it comes to audio, especially, it is so subjective, meaning that everybody has different ears and everyone hears things differently. It's easy to show someone a car and say, man, look at how cool this car is. Right? And even someone that don't care about cars, your mother or, your partner, whoever, could say, wow, that does look cool. Or wow, look at what that thing can do. Look at what the infotainment thing can do, or, whatever. They can see it. They can see it. They can feel it. They can touch it. You can drive, feel how fast it feels and how good it feels, right? I mean, that's easily digestible. Same thing with gaming, right? You can show someone visually, look at the graphics in this game. Pick up the controller. Look what you can do in this game and how cool it is, right? You can convey that. Audio doesn't work like that. You guys know, right? For folks that are into, audiophile, hi-fi audio, it doesn't work like that. I cannot count how many times I've gone to a audio show or a audio store or a boutique that have these, high-end speaker demos, and I've gone to some with the same speaker, and I'm like, that doesn't sound that great at all. Given the price the speaker is, $20,000 or whatever, $30,000, $50,000, doesn't sound that much better than my system at home, right? And I've been to some where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know that was possible, kind of thing, right? To my ears. And I've had speakers where I'm like, man, those speakers sound crazy, and I'm hearing someone else say, I don't like them. They don't sound good. They don't sound that good to me. So I can bring people, to my setup and in my wife or a friend or a neighbor and say, hey, look, check this out. And I see it. They're like, sometimes they're just like, okay, I guess it sounds good. I don't know what to listen for. They say that I don't know what to listen for. And it's like, you shouldn't have to know what to listen for, right? It should just be evident, right? But a lot of times it isn't. And I remember when I got my speakers that I have now still, right? Which are the Paradigm Reference Studio. Really highly regarded speakers at the time. Not cheap. At the time, they were roughly $3,000 just for the pair. Not cheap. But I remember getting them. And at the time, the reason why I got them, let me take a step back, and why, this kind of is why I kind of fell into the whole Paradigm family, is now there's been literally like a handful of times in my life that I've heard sound in a speaker. I've heard a demo or something that absolutely blew me away and gave me a sensation and a feeling of emotion that nothing else has ever given me. I've never felt before. And that's addicting. And that's where, again, I know you guys know what I'm talking about if you're into hi-fi, is once you hear that, whether it's in your setup or a friend setup or at a show or store, you're like, man, I didn't realize that was possible. I want that. And if you can actually get that, there are people that have said, I spent $500,000, $200,000 on my system because I'm able to bring that sensation, that feeling of connecting to music anytime I want. bring the concert to me, bring the studio to me, and being moved emotionally, spiritually by music in a way that I otherwise can't do. And that's worth it. I've heard people say that's worth 6 figures and whatever. To each his own. but that's how powerful that sensation can be. A handful of times I've gotten that the first time, technically not the first time, but one of the earlier times I did was hearing what I didn't know at the time, but what wound up being the Paradigm Signature bookshelf, version 1. So before they added the beryllium tweeter, I heard the bookshelves in a store, and I was like, what is that? I didn't, because they had the bookshelves like mounted on the wall. It was weird. And I'm like, what is that? And I thought it was a tower. It sounded so full. It was like holographic. I was like, holy crap. This is like 2000 and I don't even know, 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there. And I was like, I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know that kind of sound was possible. Now the signatures, again, were way out my price range at the time. But what they did was trickle the technology down. The same driver technology that they had in Signature at the time, they trickled down into the studios. And guess what? A few years later, the studios were in my budget. And I was like, okay, if this is the closest I can get to that, I'm all in, right? And I was coming from some Polk Audio. I love Polk. They helped me down. That was like the first speaker brand that I really had for any kind of home theater setup or hi-fi setup. And I rode with Polk for years, and I've had different models within their line. At this point, I had moved up to the towers. I had the RTI 8, which was their entry level, the smallest tower they had, but it was a tower. And I remember, like, man, I got the Studio 100s. They were bigger, they were badder, right? They had the aluminum tweeter tech from Signature, the gold. They had 3 7-inch woofers. My RTI 8s only had 2 6.5 inches, and even then it was a 2.5 way, not even a full 3-way. So I'm like, I should get a lot more bass, a lot more sound, right? And I'm like, man, if I get anything near that, it's gonna sound so great. But what happened was, I'll never forget when I first got them, and mind you, I didn't know about burn-in time or run-in time, but I remember I got them, I unhooked the old speakers and I hooked up the new ones, and my immediate impression was just like, I couldn't even tell the difference. I was like, wait a minute. I went back, like, did I hook up the new ones? Okay. I was sitting there like, doesn't sound. I mean, I expected to immediately hear something. Again, the low end, the frequency response should be much wider. Again, the components, the cabinet. We're talking about a $300 speaker compared to a $1,500 speaker. Like literally 5 times the price at the time. And it didn't wow me. I'll give you that. I'll tell you that much. And it didn't move me. Now, over time, over the years, I've grown to appreciate my studios, and ultimately, I think they're a great speaker. But my initial impression was so like, it was so disheartening. I never want to feel that again. You know what I mean? Do you guys I never want to feel that again. Especially knowing that the next purchase for my speaker, in my mind, I really want to be quote unquote in-game, which doesn't necessarily mean I will never, ever, ever buy another pair of speakers in my life. I'm not that old yet. But it should mean that there is nothing I can gain from spending any more money than what I would spend for these. It's subjective at this point. There are preferences. I prefer the sound of the speaker. I prefer the look of the speaker. Stuff like that. But in terms of actual performance, it's like this needs to be a world-class speaker. The B&W Diamonds don't sound the same as the Focal Utopias, for example. Somewhat subjective, but they're both world-class speakers in their own right. They're literally, the best speakers that these reputable companies can make, and they know how to make and manufacture. That's the level I would like to be. So I don't feel like I'm missing out on something. I don't feel like, my speakers are the weak link in my system. They can deliver and do pretty much everything that's possible for a speaker to deliver and do. My biggest fear, guys, to hit the title of this video, is that the next speakers I get, somehow I have that same sensation I had when I first got, these studios, which is to say, I'm about to jump up probably 10 times the cost almost, and really got to get the last word in speakers and sound. And I'm just kind of like, doesn't sound that much better than what I had before. It doesn't wow me. It's not moving me. I don't feel that. Now, I know that that's possible now. I didn't know that the last time around. So I know that it is possible for me to be moved. And I would like to think that if I'm not, it's something with the room, it's something with something else, cabling and other things that, I can tweak, but not the speaker. The speaker is able to do the utmost. So I just need to do the work to get what I need to get out of it, kind of thing, right? But man, if I feel that feeling again, it's going to hurt me. And that brings me to, this demo that I had recently. I made it to a Magnolia Design Center, and I got a chance to listen to the new KEF Blade 1 Metas, as well as the B&W 802 Diamond D4s. Two world-class speakers from two reputable companies. Both of these speakers are roughly 30 grand. Good as you can get. And the KEF 1, blades, if you've seen them, they look awesome. They're huge. They have a presence. They make a statement aesthetically. Diamonds also have a great aesthetic. Not as big, but they definitely look good. Big woofers in them. So I'm sitting there listening to these two speakers, and the takeaway from this is, again, now I'm talking about this particular time, but I've listened to a lot of speakers over the years, man. Like you see the video on my channel. I went through a whole shootout, right, with some high-end 10,000 plus speakers. So I've listened to a lot of stuff, and even in that video, if you hear what I'm saying and hear my tone, it's like I wasn't really wowed by anything in that video. Everything sounded good, but nothing was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible, So that's been by and large my experience. The times that I've been wowed, like I said, it's a handful in 20 plus years. 90% of the time, I'm just kind of like, man, this doesn't really sound like I would expect it to sound given the price point, or given the look of the speaker, or the engineering in the speaker and what I know, right? That's usually my experience. My experience is similar now, listening to the KEF and the 802s. I've heard the B&W D4s several times. This is probably like my fourth or fifth time, honestly, hearing them. But I had a chance to sit down and listen for about half an hour, and I actually was able to do a little bit of A and B, although it wasn't really A and B because the associated equipment between the two were completely different, and they were also located in different parts of the store. Really weird. So it's not a fair comparison. I'm not really going to compare them. That's not what it's about. But my impression and my learnings from this experience was to follow. First of all, again, I wasn't absolutely wowed. I'm listening to it, and in my mind, I'm like, I know that these are $30,000 speakers. And honestly, these are two speakers that I'm considering in my mind. Like, hey, let me give it a go. Like, this is up there. It's reputable. Let me hear what this has to offer. Maybe this could be the speaker for me. I've heard so much about the KEF Blade. So many people say it's their dream speaker. I've heard people literally trade in the Paradigm Persona and Focal Sopras to say, hey, I want a Blade, right? It's like, really? So I was like, let me just really take some time to listen to it. And it has some Mark Levinson gear, and some Blue Sound, streamer, not the highest end stuff, but pretty good. And Macintosh was powering the B&W. And my overall impression was, I wasn't wild. I'm listening to it like this is $30-something thousand. This is that dream speaker for some folks. This is the flagship. I wasn't feeling that. I gotta be honest, right? That doesn't mean it sounded bad. But again, going to 10 times the cost of what I have now, like, did it sound 10 times as good? Absolutely not, right? That said, I'm listening closer. And I'm comparing some tracks I'm familiar with to the B&W. And again, the B&W didn't wow me either. But what was interesting was to hear how different they sounded. Right now, they're both trying to get to the last word in sound quality. They are, right? They're both flagship speakers. These two UK brands that have been doing speakers for decades and are reputable. They have two of the same goals, but they have very different approaches to getting there. You can see that, and obviously, in just looking at the speakers. But you can hear it. And that was interesting to me. Like, I can hear the pluses and minuses for each. And it wasn't so much that, one was bad or wrong. It was just different, right? So, for example, the advantages of the KEFs to me was that the sound stage was bigger and deeper for sure. I love the presentation of the sound. Instruments were all around. You can, and even like I said, they had depth to it. So I can hear the guitar playing behind the right speaker, piano playing in between the two speakers. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. The B&W didn't do that nearly as well, at least not in that room. But I liked that. I enjoyed that. The other thing I liked about the Kefs was the mid-range. The vocals sounded noticeably better to me. More clear and uncolored, more natural, especially females. But listening to some vocal tracks, it was apparent. It sounded more realistic. Listening to people talking, again, combined with the sound staging, that was there. The B&Ws had two other advantages. To me, the endpoints of the frequency response sounded better on the B&Ws. So what I mean is the bass, actually, to my ear, again, they were in different locations in the room too. Not a fair comparison, but in that demo, I really liked the bass sound on the B&W. It sounded more full. It sounded more complete. It sounded better integrated into the rest of the sound. It was more enjoyable. And I listened to like some jazz, some classical, and some kind of R&B. And that's the first thing I noticed. I actually thought a sub was on. I was like, "You sure the subwoofer not on?" I was asking the guy. I wanted to hear just 2-channel, and he's like, "No sub." So the Kefs are bigger. They have these woofers built into the side. It should be more full range, you would think. And the bass wasn't lacking, but it wasn't. You could tell it wasn't full range for sure. It didn't sound quite as full and integrated as the B&Ws did, admittedly. The other thing the B&Ws to me had a clear advantage on is the upper range. That tweeter, that diamond tweeter, brought out, and it was interesting because I didn't notice it until I heard certain tracks. And when I got to certain tracks, it was like, oh wow, like it just, the sparkles, the tingles, the cymbals, the highs sounded so much more, had a lot more presence and air and clarity. It was more forward, but I enjoyed that. It wasn't like harsh forward, but it was definitely more forward. The tweeters brought more attention to themselves compared to the Kefs, but to me that was actually something that I enjoyed. That stood out to me as the positive. On the Kefs, everything was a lot more laid back. Everything was a lot more reserved. To each his own. Not wrong, right? But just, a different way of presenting the sound that may appeal to some people. But it was, and I'm going back and forth. I'm like, wow, like they sounded different. It was a different presentation. And I can see 10 people sitting there in my same shoes, and you get 10 different answers on which one is better, which one is preferred. It could be a 50-50 split or, more. Neither one sounded bad. But again, I stress that I did not feel like either one justified the extreme cost and sounded noticeably better than speakers that I've heard for less, including my own. Sounded better than mine, of course, and again, it's not in my room. I get all that. It's not apples to apples. But my overall impression, right, just wasn't like, whew, I need to upgrade. You know what I mean? Like, this is next level stuff. And I'm afraid, guys, that when I do bite the bullet, in whatever speaker it is, I am going to come away like, man, years of trying to save, years of salivating over getting to this point, and it's not delivering that. And I say that from experience. That happened the last time, like I said, I bought my speakers initially, but it's happened like 90% of the time that I've heard a speaker demo. I was just sitting there kind of like, for real, this speaker is $50,000. This speaker is $100,000. It's not worth that. I'm not hearing that. I went to, Capital Audio Fest last year. I heard some speakers that were upwards of $1 million. And I was just like, for real? For real? Come on, man. I don't want to feel that after having spent this money, man, So, I don't know, man. I got some anxiety. I ain't gonna lie. I mean, I'm salivating at the idea of just finally getting this upgrade in the speakers. I am, but at the same time, I think there's a part of me that's like hesitant because I'm like, I need to be sure, and I just like, I might not do it. Like, there's like a, subconscious thing about me that's also like somewhat holding me back. It's gonna be hard to justify that to the wife and be like, man, I spent all this money, and she's gonna sit there and be like, I don't hear a difference. My ear isn't trained, and I'm gonna be like, yeah, it's not that much. Like that's crazy to me to think. But everyone says no, you know, like every speaker that I mentioned in that range, in that price range, at that level, at this level, it's like, no way. It's gonna be way better than your studio. It's gonna be this and that, you know. And that may be true in my home with my equipment and the comfort, in my own comfort. But again, I haven't really replicated that a lot in the public venue. So we shall see. But guys, can you help me out? Can you soothe my heart and kind of soothe my anxiety a little bit? Let me know what your thoughts and what your experiences were. How did you feel when you upgraded your speakers? Was it really noticeable to you? Was it really worth the cost and the price, depending on, you know, what levels you were at? I really want to know. I really want to hear your thoughts on this. You know, I hope I'm wrong. I can't wait for the day. I'm obviously still going to eventually do it anyway. I'm sure you guys know the market is going to crap. The economy is going to crap. I have too many responsibilities, so I gotta kind of hold off still, man. I was close. I was there. I had thought I had to save the fund saved, and then it's like everything went to crap, and you know I had some other priorities come up. So I'm holding on. I want to do it sooner than later, but I'm a little nervous. So let me know for real, like what you think, what speakers you have, where'd you come from, what has your upgrade path been, and how big, you know, was it? Were you able to feel that? Were you able to notice that? But in the meantime, that's it for this video. True Techno Gamer. Like, subscribe, come on back. I got more coming. Until then, next time.